In a world that demands conformity, sensitivity is often treated as a flaw, a sign of weakness. But what if it's not? What if, instead of being too sensitive, you are simply too awake to the subtle undercurrents of manipulation, too awake to the unsaid expectations, too awake to the truth that is rarely spoken but always felt? You walk into a room, and without anyone saying a word, you feel the weight of invisible judgments. Your silence becomes an echo, a reflection of something deeper, something not yet acknowledged. This was Carl Jung's understanding of the human psyche, the shadow, the part of ourselves that we suppress and hide, often unconsciously, to conform to the expectations of society. Jung knew that when we fail to confront our shadow, the parts of ourselves that we deny or suppress, it manifests in our relationships, often in the most subtle ways. It shows up in the quiet emotional withdrawal, in the dismissals, in the silent judgment, and, worse yet, in the damage we do to others without even realizing it. It's a pattern that repeats itself because we're conditioned to tolerate it. But why do we tolerate such treatment? Why do we accept the invisible silence that others project onto us? Jung didn't just theorize about this, he warned us. He gave us 44 truths, quietly embedded in every heartbreak and every quiet moment of self-doubt. If we don't know these truths, we risk living in a cycle where the same wounds are reopened time and time again, with no understanding of why it happens or how to stop it. So let's begin with the first truth. If you don't define your value, others will discount it. How often have you stayed silent when you should have spoken? How many times have you minimized your own needs to keep the peace, to avoid conflict, to make someone else feel comfortable? With every compromise, you're negotiating your own worth, and in that silence, your value becomes negotiable. And then, when you begin to speak your truth, to assert your boundaries, you'll be labeled difficult, selfish, or even unrecognizable. But it's not your truth they hate. It's the loss of control, the discomfort they feel when they no longer have power over your silence. Jung's insights about the shadow go deeper. He understood that the emotions we try to suppress, like anger, aren't inherently negative. In fact, they are protective. Your anger, your frustration, that feeling of injustice, it's not something to suppress, but something to honor. That fire inside you isn't a flaw, it's sacred protection. Your shadow is trying to defend you, to protect your boundaries, your right to exist in your full, unfiltered truth. And when we neglect these feelings, when we suppress them for too long, we begin to lose sight of ourselves. But here's the thing, people won't hear your words. They won't remember your requests or your boundaries. What they will respond to is what you tolerate. Your silence, your inability to take action, gives them permission to continue mistreating you. The more you tolerate, the more your energy rewrites your words. This is why Jung's teachings about boundaries are so critical. Boundaries are not just about saying no. They're about backing that no with actions that protect your inner peace and your sense of self-worth. A boundary that isn't supported by action is just noise, a temporary sound, soon forgotten. But a boundary that is acted upon is a powerful statement of self. If you are constantly apologizing for being hurt, constantly second-guessing your emotions, Jung would ask, why? Why do you keep erasing your own pain? Why apologize for your human experience? Every time you say, sorry, I'm just tired, or sorry if I'm overreacting, you are reinforcing a belief that your feelings are somehow burdensome. But in reality, it's not your feelings that are the problem. It's the world's inability to accept them. Your pain is not a burden, it's a truth. And when you apologize for it, you are apologizing for your right to feel. Jung's work sheds light on this. He urges us to stop apologizing for our humanity, for our emotions. Embrace your pain as part of the process of healing. Only then can we begin to heal the fractures within ourselves and, in turn, in our relationships. When you don't define your value, others will try to define it for you. In many ways, this is the foundation of all interpersonal dynamics, how we relate to ourselves and how others relate to us. Jung warned us that the first step in any meaningful relationship, whether with others or with ourselves, is establishing clear steps. If you never speak up for what you need, if you never set clear boundaries or assert your desires, you give others permission to discount your worth. When you stay silent to avoid conflict, or when you suppress your own desires for the sake of keeping the peace, you silently give permission for others to define your worth. Think about the times when you've put others' comfort before your own truth. Perhaps it was in a meeting at work, a conversation with a friend, or in a romantic relationship. You might have felt the internal tension, the quiet discomfort in your soul. But because you didn't speak up, you reinforce the belief that your needs are secondary. Over time, this erodes self-respect, and more importantly, it erodes the respect others have for you. It becomes a pattern. They continue to push boundaries, they continue to disregard your worth, and you continue to tolerate it, often without even realizing how much of yourself you're sacrificing in the process. Jung's insight into this behavior was not just about recognizing the need to speak up. It's about recognizing that our silence is also a form of acceptance, a form of self-erasure. The longer you stay silent, the more you give others the power to dictate your worth. You'll find yourself in situations where people walk all over you, make decisions without consulting you, or even belittle you, all because you never took the time to define your own value. But the moment you do start asserting yourself, the backlash begins. People will call you difficult, changeable, or even selfish. But what they're really reacting to is not the truth you've discovered about yourself, but their loss of control over you. They don't hate your truth. They hate the fact that you've reclaimed your voice, your power, and your boundaries. So, remember this truth. If you don't define your value, others will gladly do it for you. But the moment you begin to assert your worth, to speak your truth, to set firm boundaries, you will be met with resistance. They will try to label you, to box you into their perception of who you should be. But Jung's warning is clear. You don't have to play by their rules. You don't have to shrink yourself to fit into their expectations. Your value is not negotiable, and it never should be. Jung's idea of the shadow is one of his most revolutionary contributions to psychology. The shadow represents the parts of ourselves that we reject, hide, or deny. These are the traits, feelings, and desires that society deems unacceptable. So we bury them in our unconscious. We think we're better off ignoring these aspects of ourselves, but in doing so, we give them more power over us. The truth is that these suppressed parts don't disappear. They simply fester, and they begin to shape our actions in ways we can't control. Jung taught us that the shadow is not inherently evil or destructive. Rather, it is the unexpressed power within us, the emotions and desires we suppress to fit into societal molds. Think of the anger that you suppress when someone disrespects you, or the grief you hold back because showing it would be seen as weak. That anger isn't a flaw, it's a form of protection. Your shadow is trying to defend you from emotional harm, from being manipulated, from losing your sense of self. The challenge comes when we suppress the shadow for too long. It doesn't simply disappear, it becomes toxic. And over time, it begins to seep into our relationships, our work, and our daily lives. It shows up in the form of passive-aggressive behavior, resentment, and an inability to establish clear boundaries. These suppressed emotions begin to control us in ways we don't fully understand. But here's the paradox. Once we face and embrace our shadow, it loses its grip on us. The key is not to eliminate these parts of ourselves, but to integrate them. Instead of letting the shadow control us, we learn to recognize its messages, its signals, and use them to empower ourselves. When we acknowledge our anger, our vulnerability, and our desires, we gain control over them. We no longer fear these parts of ourselves. Instead, we use them as a source of strength and self-awareness. Jung's teachings emphasize that the shadow is not something to be feared. It's a part of us, a necessary part of our psyche, and it's through understanding and integrating that shadow that we truly begin to heal and reclaim our personal power. When we suppress our emotions, we lose the ability to protect ourselves from manipulation, mistreatment, and emotional harm. But when we embrace our shadow, we stand in our power and refuse to allow others to define us. It's easy to say we have boundaries. We can talk about them, express them, and even convince ourselves that we're setting limits. But in Jung's view, boundaries are only effective when they are backed by action. If we say no but don't follow through, if we set limits but allow people to overstep them without consequence, our boundaries lose their meaning. They become mere words, empty sounds that have no power. The true power of a boundary lies in how we enforce it, in the actions we take to protect our space, our peace, and our integrity. Jung's teachings remind us that boundaries are not just about defending ourselves from others, they are about respecting ourselves. When we fail to establish clear and firm boundaries, we send the message that we are not worthy of respect. But when we stand by our boundaries, when we back up our words with actions, we send a powerful message to ourselves and to others. I am worthy of respect. I am worthy of peace. I will not tolerate mistreatment. Think about the times when you've allowed people to overstep your boundaries. Perhaps it was a friend who constantly asked for favors without reciprocating, or a partner who dismissed your feelings. At first, you may have felt uncomfortable, but over time, you may have begun to tolerate it. You convinced yourself that it wasn't a big deal, that you didn't want to cause conflict, but in reality, each time you allowed someone to cross a boundary without taking action, you were teaching them that it was acceptable to treat you poorly. You were teaching them that your needs didn't matter as much as theirs. Jung's warning is simple. Boundaries unbacked by action are meaningless. They are just noise. But when you take action, when you stand firm in your boundaries, you create a reality where you are respected and your needs are valued. The energy you put into enforcing your boundaries will rewrite the way people treat you. It won't be easy, and it won't happen overnight, but it's the only way to protect your emotional health and personal integrity. Action is the key to transforming your boundaries from empty words into powerful tools of self-respect. How often have you apologized for your pain? How many times have you said, "Sorry, I'm just tired," or "Sorry if I'm overreacting"? These phrases are more than just expressions of discomfort. They are signs of conditioning. From a young age, many of us were taught to suppress our feelings, to apologize for being upset, for being vulnerable, for simply being human. But why do we apologize for our pain? Why do we apologize for our emotions, as if they are something to be ashamed of? Jung believed that this behavior was deeply ingrained in our culture. We've been taught, often unconsciously, that to feel is to be a burden. We've learned to hide our emotions, to minimize them, and to apologize for them because we've been conditioned to believe that emotional expression is inconvenient or inappropriate. But in doing so, we rob ourselves of the ability to heal. We make our pain invisible, both to ourselves and to others, and we continue to suffer in silence. The act of apologizing for being hurt is a form of self-erasure. It teaches us that our pain doesn't matter, that our feelings are secondary to the comfort of others. Jung's warning is clear. Don't apologize for your emotions. Don't apologize for being human. The moment we stop apologizing for our pain, we begin to reclaim our emotional power. We begin to honor our feelings as valid, as important, and as essential to our healing process. In our relationships, this behavior shows up in subtle ways. We apologize for being upset when someone treats us poorly. We apologize for setting boundaries. We apologize for taking care of ourselves. But it's time to stop. It's time to stop apologizing for our feelings, for our needs, and for our boundaries. Jung believed that our ability to confront our own emotions, to face our pain without shame or guilt, is the key to emotional freedom. When we stop apologizing for our pain, we begin the journey of healing and self-empowerment. Jung believed that trauma fundamentally shapes the way we perceive love. If your past experiences of love were built on the foundation of survival, pleasing others, adapting, shrinking your true self, then that's the version of love you will continue to seek. But it's not love at all. It's familiar pain, disguised as love, replayed over and over. When we are wounded in childhood or in past relationships, we tend to attract what feels familiar to us, even if that familiarity is painful. We confuse attachment and dependence with love. Trauma teaches us to seek out relationships where we are not required to be ourselves, but instead, we shrink, adapt, and become what others need us to be. But this is not love. It is simply the repeating cycle of unresolved pain. Jung's insight into this dynamic is key. Love, true love, requires freedom. Freedom to be oneself, without the constant need to perform or please. It's easy to fall into this trap because, as humans, we crave connection. But when that connection is based on conditioned responses, like adapting to someone else's needs at the cost of our own, what we are really doing is reinforcing the trauma. We are perpetuating a pattern of self-betrayal, not self-love. This false connection becomes a lifeline, even though it is ultimately suffocating. It feels familiar, but it isn't healthy. It's a survival mechanism, masquerading as affection. Jung's teachings encourage us to reevaluate how we view love. Love shouldn't make us shrink into someone we're not. It should make us expand. It should help us grow into our fullest self, even if that means challenging others, even if that means confronting our own fears. The love we seek in others must be one that supports our growth, our healing, and our wholeness, not one that demands we diminish ourselves to fit the mold. Jung's concept of love is liberating, yet challenging. True love asks us to step into our own power, to no longer seek validation from others, but to first validate ourselves. Only then can we begin to recognize the love that doesn't come with conditions, that doesn't require us to betray our true selves. This kind of love is rare, but it is the kind we all deserve. When someone's love requires you to betray your authentic self, it's not love, it's a transaction, a trade-off. It's a deal in disguise. And the price of that deal, your soul, your energy, your true self. At first, it may seem like a fair trade. After all, love, in its most familiar form, often feels like compromise. But this kind of love is toxic because it demands your sacrifice, not your growth. Jung was very clear on this. If love forces you to shrink, to silence parts of yourself, it is not love, it is manipulation. And even though it may feel good in the moment, it will never fill the void it claims to heal. Relationships that demand we give up pieces of ourselves, that force us to live according to someone else's rules, are built on fragile foundations. They may look like love from the outside, but deep down, they are hollow. It's easy to fall into the trap of conditional love, especially when we feel desperate for connection. We tell ourselves that we have to compromise or make sacrifices for the sake of the relationship. But what we are really doing is betraying our own needs, our own boundaries, our own self-respect. When we compromise our true selves for the sake of a relationship, we begin to lose our sense of identity. And when that happens, the relationship, no matter how seemingly strong, will begin to crumble. Jung's teachings remind us that love should never require us to abandon ourselves. True love is not about pleasing others or giving up parts of who we are. It is about embracing each other's flaws, encouraging growth, and supporting each other in the process of becoming more whole. If love demands your self-betrayal, it is not love, it is a transaction, a deal where you lose every time you say yes to what breaks you. True love can only exist when both partners are free to be their full, authentic selves. It is about connection, not control. It is about growth, not sacrifice. In a relationship built on true love, both people should feel empowered to be their true selves. And this empowerment should create a partnership based on mutual respect, not manipulation. To be loved is a basic human desire, but when we wear a mask to be loved, we are only setting ourselves up for a cage. The mask we wear to make others comfortable, to fit in, to avoid rejection, eventually becomes a prison. We become so good at pretending, at being what others need us to be, that we forget who we truly are underneath the mask. Over time, we lose ourselves in the persona we've created to gain love and acceptance. Jung's idea of the mask goes beyond simple social facades. It represents the parts of ourselves that we bury to conform, the traits we suppress to avoid judgment. It's the smile we put on when we want to cry, the laughter we force to mask our discomfort, the yes we say when we want to scream no. It's a facade built on fear, fear of rejection, fear of abandonment, and fear of being misunderstood. But what we don't realize is that by continually wearing this mask, we become disconnected from who we truly are. And the longer we wear it, the harder it becomes to take it off. The mask becomes a cage, and the cage traps us in a life that isn't ours. We begin to lose touch with our true feelings, our true desires, and ultimately, our true selves. We become so wrapped up in pleasing others that we forget what it feels like to live for ourselves. This self-denial can feel like safety at first, but it's actually suffocating. The more we suppress our truth, the more we distance ourselves from the people we truly want to be. Jung's teachings encourage us to take off the mask, to stop pretending to be someone we're not for the sake of approval. It's time to confront the truth of who we are, even if that truth scares us. Only by embracing our authentic selves, by living without the fear of rejection, can we truly find peace and freedom. The mask may protect us from the pain of rejection, but it also keeps us trapped in a life that isn't our own. Jung believed that true liberation comes from embracing all parts of ourselves, not just the parts that are socially acceptable. When we remove the mask, we reclaim our power, our authenticity, and our ability to love ourselves. It's not easy, but it is essential for living a full, authentic life. And once we take off the mask, we discover that there is more love and acceptance waiting for us, not because we're pretending to be someone else, but because we are finally showing up as ourselves. Jung's understanding of emotional labor is profound. He believed that when one person in a relationship is constantly giving, comforting, explaining, holding space, absorbing the emotional damage, the other person isn't reciprocating. It becomes a form of exploitation. Love is meant to be a shared experience, not a one-way transaction. But far too often, we find ourselves in relationships where we give and give, but receive little in return. We pour our energy into others, offering support and comfort, but when it's our turn to be supported, we are met with silence or indifference. This imbalance, where one person bears the emotional weight of the relationship, is a form of exploitation. It's not love, it's depletion. Emotional labor without reciprocity is not only unfair, it's unsustainable. Over time, the person who is constantly giving begins to feel drained, empty, and resentful. But this emotional depletion is often masked as love, and because we've been conditioned to believe that giving is the ultimate expression of love, we continue to pour from an empty cup. Jung's insight into this dynamic is simple. Love without reciprocity is not love, it's exploitation. True love is about mutual exchange. It's about both people supporting each other, sharing emotional labor, and nurturing each other's well-being. If you are the only one carrying the emotional weight of the relationship, then it is time to recognize that this is not love. This is a pattern of emotional neglect, and it will continue until you put a stop to it. Jung's warning is clear. Emotional labor is only love when it is reciprocated. When it is not, it becomes a drain on your energy, a subtle form of manipulation that leaves you feeling exhausted and unfulfilled. It's time to stop giving without receiving. It's time to set boundaries, to expect reciprocity, and to recognize that true love is not about sacrifice, it's about mutual support and emotional balance. One of the most powerful lessons we can learn is that we teach others how to treat us by the way we treat ourselves. Jung believed that self-respect is the foundation of all healthy relationships. If you don't respect yourself, others won't respect you either. If you allow people to mistreat you, dismiss your feelings, or overstep your boundaries without consequence, you are teaching them that it's acceptable to do so. The key to teaching others how to treat us lies in our own behavior. When we stand up for ourselves, when we assert our needs, when we refuse to tolerate disrespect, we are teaching others how to treat us. But this lesson must be consistent. It's not enough to set a boundary once and expect people to respect it. We must enforce our boundaries every time, without exception. And when we do, we send a clear message. I will not tolerate mistreatment. My boundaries are non-negotiable. Jung's teaching on self-respect is fundamental. Respect for ourselves creates a mirror for others to respect us. When we respect ourselves enough to speak up, to set clear boundaries, and to take action when those boundaries are crossed, we are teaching others to do the same. The more we honor our own needs, the more we show others how to honor them too. If you are constantly allowing others to treat you poorly, it's time to ask yourself why. What message are you sending? What are you teaching others about your worth? Jung's wisdom is clear. You teach people how to treat you by what you tolerate. If you don't tolerate disrespect, people will learn to respect you. If you tolerate mistreatment, that's the lesson they'll take away. The choice is yours.